Welcome to episode 3 of the Cellarcast. Bit of a slower news week, I guess, at least in terms of things that I care about or things that interest me. But there were a couple. So there's no sad, there's no depressing stories on the docket today. And also I haven't really played anything very new this week, so nothing of that sort either. However, I did I wanted to start this off with a few updates on some things from previous episodes that I talked about. The first one from the first episode, the Sega did launch a Sonic VTuber. I don't know if it was I didn't do any further investigation into whether or not Sonic being a VTuber was a long-term thing or just a bit of a special one-off. But they did do it, and in fact it was a day before or after I recorded that episode, so I felt kind of stupid. I remember putting it up and being like, I wonder when they're gonna do the Sonic VTuber thing, because apparently it's happening. And then literally that day, I saw a video of I think it was Korone from Hololive reacting to it, and yeah, so my bad. I saw that because literally the story was hours old at the time that I recorded that. So I was like, yeah, this probably won't be for, I don't know, maybe a few weeks or something. Because it was a rumor too. The other thing that I didn't even touch on in retrospect was they said they were going to do a Sonic theme park, which is interesting. I don't know if it's going to be in a collaboration with an existing, they could do a Universal Studios, but they open up the Sonic Land. I wonder are they gonna build an entire gigantic amusement park just for Sonic? It seems a little much. Honestly, it seems a little much. Does Sega have that much money? Theme parks are expensive to keep up. Not many people can do them. But I guess, I don't know, maybe they had a really good quarter? And so they're doing a Sonic theme park. I would be surprised if they only kept it, because Nintendo did the theme park. They did Nintendo Land, which I actually don't know if that's in collaboration with an existing theme park owner, because I don't have that much interest in Nintendo nor theme parks, so I also did not investigate that at all. But I would be, I guess, yeah, Sonic has a lot of, I would want to see a park based around a bunch of Sega's properties, because Sega has so many IPs that they just don't do anything with it. They just left to the wayside. I think that's one of the things that when you look at Sega's history, one of their, every time that they've been good is when they were on the offensive, and all the times that they regressed were when they were just extremely timid and reactive. I think that's one of their big problems historically, is that they're just they make business decisions reactively. A lot of times, of course, you're going to find exceptions. And Sonic's a great example of that. People didn't like that, we're going to scrap the entire thing, new thing. Even when something was good, they were like, okay, we're going to scrap the whole thing, new thing. And it feels like they just worked themselves into this really unhealthy pattern where they just ended up downscaling until they just kind of did it to themselves, and they just became kind of a shell. They focused so much on Sonic but with the same mindset, and it really hurt them in the long run. And now they're basically they're just Sonic and Yakuza and Phantasy Star. And Phantasy Star, nobody in the West even thinks about because it's been locked to Japan for like 7 years, 8 years, maybe approaching 9 by this point, honestly. And only just opened up their English servers. So Sega, like, just Monkey Ball. Just throw a bone to Super Monkey Ball, please. Come on, Choo Choo Rocket. Come on, was Choo Choo Rocket? Wait, hang on. Am I confusing that with something else? What? Who did Choo Choo Rocket? Yuji Naka. Oh wait, was that published by Sega? Yeah, okay, I thought so. Choo Choo, give one to Choo Choo Rocket, okay? Just try. I think it's really unfortunate that the kart racers, the name of their kart racing series is Sonic and Sega All Stars. Like, one, that title is incredibly wordy, but also it's like Nintendo was able to put, they're able to just call Smash Super Smash Brothers. Like, there's just a hint of a reference to Mario, but for the most part they can just call it their own thing. And because they have so many different series, doesn't Fire Emblem have more representatives in Smash than Mario does? How many reps does Mario have? They got Mario, Luigi, Peach, Daisy, Bowser, the Piranha Plant. Oh, Rosalina, that's like 7? Oh, Bowser Jr. I think Fire Emblem has about 8 as well. So Fire Emblem has like about 8, the same amount as Mario, which is insane. Anyway, that's a totally different topic. Yeah, Sega Land, or whatever they decide to call it, Sonic Land. Probably gonna launch in Japan. I will have zero interest in it, and it may not even make an appearance on this podcast. Second update, Might and Magic 10, the game that Ubisoft made completely unplayable and kept selling, and in fact put on sale so you could get your scam on sale. They took it down. They took it off Steam. So good on them. Actually, no, not good on them. This should have never happened in the first place. Ideally, there shouldn't have been DRM at all. They should have. What they should have done is just release an update that unlocks the game from having DRM. Like, straight up, just disable it and leave it up. It's going to take someone less than a day to implement that, I'm assuming. Just spitballing. And then you can still make money off of the sale of a game from like 2014. So, why? Actually, the more that I think about it, the more it upsets me. The fact that they just killed it entirely, that sucks. So yeah, and it's a great reminder of why piracy and emulation is still important, guys, because now you literally can't buy Might and Magic 10 on PC. It's just gone. Maybe you can get it through Uplay, but like, no. Actually, no, they probably killed it on Uplay too. Ugh. Yeah, it sucks. If you're a big fan of Might and Magic, if you're a fan of anything Ubisoft, I feel for you. Good news. Moving on to good news. Dusk 82. If you guys don't know what Dusk is, it's probably one of the best games of 2018 that you might never have heard of. It is a throwback first-person shooter, and it's really good. It is phenomenal. It is actually like a 9 to a 10 out of 10. It's fairly lengthy, It's like it follows the kind of classic 3-episode, about 8 or 9 episodes each formula. Got tons of secrets. It's got a sort of a simplified or kind of a Quake inspired 3D graphics. Low poly. It's a low poly art style, which that and Ultra Kill is slightly more stylized. Dusk follows it a little more strictly, and it still looks great. Like, it's kind of like it's cool because obviously pixel art had a big resurgence in like the 2010s, where there was this huge obsession with like 3D graphics, and then people are like, well, actually, there's kind of like a merit to pixel artwork, and it's kind of something that endures, and it tends to age a lot better. It's almost like the black and white, or like the film. Actually, no, actually, that's a different thing I'm thinking of. I used to describe 8 and like 16-bit music to people when I would like try to explain what I liked about it. I would say that it was it's like the vinyl of electronic music, because of it has a really specific sound and like compression and like vintage, not really retro, older feeling to it. You can distinguish a new 8-bit song from like a actual 8-bit soundboard, or something that is trying to emulate an 8-bit soundboard from an actual one. That's a little neither here nor there, but pixel art has kind of sort of the same appeal, is that it's very like, it's stylized in a way that's sort of similar to kind of like text, honestly, like kind of like reading a book. It's more interpretive, and so when you look at like kind of poorly aged 3D graphics, there's a level of I'm seeing the deficiencies in this. And when you look at something like a classic Castlevania game or a Mega Man game, the lack of details are leaving things up to your interpretation and your brain to get going, and that's kind of the main difference that I've always found. You fill in the details, kind of like how when you're reading a book or something text-based, there are descriptions of things, but you are imagining, you're filling in some of the kind of ancillary details. Is ancillary the right word? What the heck does ancillary mean? I just kind of felt right. Providing necessary support to the primary activities or operation of an organization, industry, or system. So absolutely not, actually. That is not at all what I meant. Let's say the more superfluous elements of the scene. Like, when an author doesn't describe everything in a scene, you just kind of fill it in on your own, and that kind of puts a stronger image in your brain. Sort of the same way with pixel art. And getting back to Dusk, jeez. Dusk sort of does the same thing, but with low poly models. And it's a very specific kind of like balance between things like characters and monsters that look kind of almost misshapen, but in a way where you can get a very clear image of what they look like, and there is a just little enough detail, which is kind of a funny thing to say, or just enough detail that you can still fill in the appearance in your brain. On top of that, Dusk has immaculate level design and really great feeling guns. The movement is awesome. It moves like Quake, just like extremely fast, high. There's no there's no walking and running. You're just running. You're just running at like 70 miles an hour. It's extremely intense. It's quite difficult, and it's also, there's so many things that I could say about Dusk. It's one of the few times where I've seen an action horror game that goes 100% on both. And it works. It's the type of game. There's a few things that I could use to sell someone on it. It's the type of game where you can do, you can like shoot cultists. You can do a backflip and shoot a cultist in the head with like dual wielding shotguns. And also you can feel completely powerless and terrified at the same time. It can give you a super explosive rocket launcher weapon, and you can still be scared out of your mind at certain points while having that weapon. That's kind of an ode to its atmosphere. Some of the most clever level ideas I've ever seen, and kind of ties into, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because it's getting a spin-off called Dusk 82, which is kind of like it's called a demake, I guess you would call it, is the term for this type of thing, where it's a top-down, extremely simplified graphics puzzle game. It's like a puzzle action game, and it seems to be based on one of the level gimmicks. I don't want to spoil anything, but basically, I don't want to spoil anything too hard. It's kind of impossible to describe this without doing that a little bit. But this is like an awesome moment from that game, from the original Dusk. But there's a moment where you get a power-up that basically turns the game into super hot, where time only moves when you do, so to speak. And it's freaking awesome. It is one of the most memorable levels I have ever played in any game. And it's literally only like one section that you get it for. And it's not even the focus of that level. And the other focus of that level is what makes it such a standout in my mind. Please go play Dusk. It's amazing. It's really good. Or at least listen to the soundtrack. It's an Andrew Holschult soundtrack. It's fire, okay? But this appears to be, 82 seems to be based off of that super hot type mechanic where it looks like the enemies only move. Some things seem to, actually no, everything basically stops when the player stops moving. I've got it playing right now while I'm talking, just to refresh my memory a little bit. So looks like there's combat and some of the same weapons from the game, and enemies' bullets will pause if you stand still, and as will they. And it looks like it's got some neat mechanics. I'm seeing like these little boost pads that'll like move you around. But it looks like a lot of the puzzle gameplay is based around kind of block pushing. Dave Zemansky, who was the lead, basically Dusk was made by like 3 people, if I recall correctly. And the main one was Dave Zemansky. One of those guys was Andrew Holschult on the soundtrack, and the other guy was Dave Zemansky. I don't remember what the third guy did, if I'm even remembering correctly. But he's basically like he's the brain. He's the main creator, and he describes it as being inspired by classics like Chip's Challenge and Sokoban. I would definitely. It's not out yet. It is the release date says soon. TM. It's got that really the wonderfully irreverent new blood kind of tone in its marketing. If you go down to the system requirements, additional notes just say, you can run this. You can run this it's a potato game. It says, requires a 64-bit processor and operating system, OS Windows 10, processor, anything made within the last decade, memory, 1 gig of RAM, graphics, any made within the last decade, storage, 200 megabytes of available space, integrated sound card. You can run this. Speaking of that sound card, one of the things that he mentions in the trailer for it, I was not expecting that finger to crack. One of the things he mentions in the trailer is editable music files, so you can like put whatever music you want to, and a level editor, which sounds awesome. The original Dusk did not have a level editor, but I don't know how well it would have. It would have been cool. It would be cool to have it. There might even be mods that I just don't know. Dusk 82 will have a level editor to make your own little puzzles. So that looks super rad. It's probably going to be pretty cheap, I'm assuming. So I'm totally checking that out when it comes out. Next thing, surprised no one really talked about this. Suda51 did an interview, or he did an AMA on r/games, I believe. I was checking this out, and because I think he's really cool, and I was slightly disappointed when I went through the questions, and almost all of them were hyper-specific questions about the Silver Case, which is a game I believe was just recently re-released on Switch, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's just really specific questions about that. And I have not played Silver Case, so mostly was not useful to me. However, he did get a few questions about, he got one question about, some No More Heroes 3, and one in particular that I thought was pretty funny, where someone asked him what games he'd been playing and what games he'd finished. And he listed No More Heroes 3, saying, I really like that game. I'm getting really into it. So, I've beaten it 10 times. Just classic. Classic Suda move. Really nothing else on that front. It's if you were a fan of the Silver Case, I guess go read that, because he elaborates on some extremely specific details that are otherwise glossed over from that game. So next thing, really not much on that front. I just thought that was funny, and Suda's cool, and reminder that No More Heroes 3 is coming out sometime soon. Minecraft is given an adults-only rating in South Korea. This one caught my eye. So, there is an update to this, which I will go over after running through the original story. This one comes from PC Gamer. Minecraft, the incredibly kid-friendly sandbox game, has essentially been slapped with an adults-only age rating in South Korea. The bizarre restriction comes down to the country's Cinderella law, which pulls the plug on any child or teen hoping to play games with their mates into the early hours of the morning. The law has been in place since 2011 and means anyone under the age of 16 is prohibited from playing online video games between midnight and 6 a.m. Instead of bothering to implement any form of after-hours screening to Xbox Live or separate servers, Microsoft instead changed their policy for South Korea in 2012, so anybody wanting to make an account has to be at least 19 years old. Okay. They took the easy way out. However, this has not appeared to, it goes on to talk about how Minecraft was not affected because, well, it wasn't affected as much because you can still sign in with your Mojang or your Mojang or however it's pronounced account, which does not require an age verification. However, and this was something I encountered recently because I just today actually reinstalled Minecraft to give it a whirl. And I got a little message about, because I signed in with my Mojang account, because I've tried to set up an Xbox Live account for something one time I had to, and it was a goddamn nightmare, and I was like, I'll just do a Mojang account. So, they are trying to streamline and migrate all the Mojang accounts over to Microsoft accounts. So, quoting, the migration started off as a voluntary thing, but then in March an additional warning popped up specifically for South Korea, informing that anyone looking to buy the game would need to be at least 19 years old. So while Minecraft currently sits at a 12+ age rating through the country's Games Rating and Administration Committee, the mandatory Xbox Live sign-in bumps that straight up to an 18+ rating. Assuming that you won't just lie. Understandably, many Korean players are pretty peeved about the whole thing. A petition on the government's official website has accrued over 88,000 signatures asking for South Korea to get rid of the Cinderella law and its inadvertent restriction of Minecraft. Oh, and it goes on to quote, The law finally stretched out to Minecraft, which is regarded as the epitome of educational and creative games. A machine translation of the petition reads, They've come for Minecraft, and the South Koreans are putting their foot down, their collective foot. They're saying, no more, we're going to draw the line in the sand. Korea, quoting, Korea will become the only game market where even Minecraft is reduced to an adult game. Yeah, it goes on to claim that the curfew law is unnecessary and disregards the benefits games can have on youngsters. In more positive Minecraft news, oh yeah, that one version of the game's alpha was rediscovered. Yeah, so interesting case of a government kind of like overreaching where really parents should be more involved. Eventually the government can't just do everything for you guys. You're gonna have to tell your kids not to stay up past midnight playing Minecraft. It reminds me actually of a worse situation in Australia, where the Australian government just completely infantilizes its citizens, and it's really, I'm not Australian, so I can't say annoying because it doesn't affect me, but I can imagine that as an Australian it would be obnoxious and a little insulting. So for instance, most recent example of this, they've always been real hard asses about game ratings. Most recently, the one that I saw was that Disco Elysium had been given either an adults only or just been straight up banned, which is incredible and unreasonable because I think after a review, it was just slapped with a mature rating, which it should have been from the beginning. But the idea that a game that's aimed towards adults is not able to have adult themes in it, and not even in the way that it often comes out of like, oh my god, I can't have my nudity in my game. Like, no, Disco Elysium is like, it's very much it's arguably quite a good message because the main contention was the depiction of drug and alcohol use and abuse, really, in that game's case, which is always depicted as extremely negative. Like, it's a game where you can like stand up to do something and then have a heart attack from overexertion and die because your body is so messed up from drug use. So yeah, they've always. I mean, like with Grand Theft Auto, those types of games being banned and whatever and what have you, or it's kind of inconsistent in terms of whether they get banned or get slapped with overly extreme ratings. But they just seem a little overprotective of their adult population, and I can't say anything in particular because I'm not Australian. I've never lived there, but I would be maybe a little bit peeved about it. Next thing, kind of interested me. It was a blog post that comes from Team Salvato, developers of Doki Doki Literature Club. And so recently there has been an enhanced version of DDLC called DDLC Plus, which is coming to multiple platforms. I don't know if it was on like PC first, but it's at least coming to consoles. And so they released this blog post about specifically Dan Salvato, so I'm assuming that is the guy. The Salvato of Team Salvato. Talking about the potential of censorship in the game on console platforms. So it's basically saying, I want to talk about censorship with the news of DDLC Plus coming to consoles like PS and Nintendo Switch. It's something that a lot of you have asked about. People are worried that based on the game content, DDLC might have certain parts of the game censored or otherwise altered in order to comply with the regulations of these platforms. DDLC contains some highly sensitive content material that is designed to have specific psychological effects. We feel confident in the nuance of DDLC's content, but we also know that certain platforms might have regulations that we wouldn't be an exception to. So he basically goes on to say that thankfully none of the content has been removed. There is one scene towards the end of Act 2 where he specifically went in and made specific changes to it to, I guess, fall in line with gore depictions or something. I'm not quite sure. I'm aware that this is on the PlayStation version because the Sony is infamous for having a very rigorous compliance check and in terms of content, to the point where I believe Japanese gamers call it the Sony check because it's so infamous. Yeah, so that's cool. Good thing for all the Doki Doki fans. I was never really interested in Doki Doki. It was weird because it was, some people just assumed that I like knew what it was and liked it. And not that I disliked it, I was just never interested in it because I remember learning about it via osmosis. And I remember learning about like 10% of the game and basically figuring out the entire gimmick. Not to say that it's just a gimmick. I'm sure that there's something very poignant in it. Oh, I hate that I said the word poignant. I try to avoid that word because I think it sounds pretentious. So I'm aware that there's probably something very meaningful and more substantial than just being a gimmick, but the gimmick itself did not interest me. I was the idea, like, that game had an audience that it aimed for, and it hit that audience hard. Like, people who aren't really familiar with dating sims or that kind of like scene or culture, and then suddenly, basically, you know, it works if you don't know anything about the game. And as soon as, I don't know if I see these reactions to people who are like, they see like, because the opening of the game is like, it contains content like not suitable for the easily disturbed or something like that, and they're like, what is this? And then I'm like, oh, okay, I understand basically exactly where this is going to go. I basically figured it out pretty immediately. Not to say that I'm some incredibly genius observer, but I've been through the experience of, oh, this thing is this cute kawaii Japanese high school thing is actually super dark and messed up. What? With what is that one called with the zombies? Hang on, I always forget the name. The fucking zombie. I'm just calling it the zombie loli anime. Kakogurashi, yeah. Exactly it. Okay, awesome. I'm glad that I was able to search up zombie loli anime and get the first result. Gakogurashi. Just like, oh, it starts out and it's a cute, just a cute slice of life school thing with some cute schoolgirls, and then, oh wait, it's actually a zombie apocalypse? What? So Doki Doki did not. I was like, okay, that's cool, and some people were really into it, and that's all right. It just wasn't. It wasn't for me. It literally, like, it wasn't, like, immediately as soon as I see that, like, I'm like, this game doesn't look Japanese. This looks like a Western game that is using an anime art style. So I immediately get suspicious. I'm like, okay, why is it trying to be like this? Like, 'cause it does it pretty well. So, like, why is it? I'm like, you can't just release. There's no way that a dating sim with some, like, regular looking schoolgirls in an art style that's trying really hard to be anime, that implies that it fails. It doesn't. But there's no way that, like, this gets popular and there's not, like, a catch to it. And as soon as I got, like, the earliest smidgen of, oh, this is like a psychological horror thing, she's like a yandere character, all right, it didn't interest me. Sounds like I'm really ragging on it, but I don't know. I've never talked to anyone. I've never gone through this. No one's ever asked me my thoughts on DDLC. Anyway, so there's the second half of the blog post that I found really interesting. So it says, back in 2017, soon after DDLC was first released, a bug was discovered where the game would eventually enter a crash loop during Act 3, forcing the player to move on rather than getting to spend as much time as they wanted during that scene. It was a really unfortunate bug that prevented me from delivering the intended experience to some players, so I quickly prepared a patch for it. Then I got an email from a fan. The email was a plea for me not to fix this bug. It turns out that the bug had a profound effect on the player's experience with the game, because they emotionally had to come to terms with being forced to progress past that scene. They felt so strongly about their experience that they wanted me to keep the bug so that other players would have a chance to experience that same feeling. How cool is that? Nobody ever could have expected that. I did end up patching the game, but I will never forget that player's experience. It taught me that the uniqueness of each player's experience goes far beyond what I originally assumed. Our unique experiences with video games bring us together and enable us to blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so he goes on to, talk about how he's trying to make the release on PlayStation as authentic as possible, and who everyone enjoys and all that. But it really got me thinking about, just how games are interesting, because movies, like, there's one movie that everyone watches. Everyone's going to watch the same movie, unless it's Blade Runner. But other than that, basically every movie's, like, everyone's watching the same thing, and they're all consuming the same information in the same order and the same pace. Games are completely different, and they're kind of closer to books, I guess, in that you can go but even more extreme in the sense that you can go as fast or as slow as you feel the need to. And that can and you get a lot of freedom where other mediums don't allow you to. Like, how many scenes... Like, a director in a movie has to figure out how long to hold a shot or how long to stay in a scene. But, like, a level designer, you could be... The player it could take, like, 3 minutes if you're speed running fast as possible, or it could take an hour if you're taking your time, or you're just like bad and you keep getting stuck on something. You can have a totally different experience, and so the entire idea of like pacing games is very like abstract and really up in the air. And sometimes things can affect your experience that the developer really didn't intend to, which is very, very rare in terms of any other medium. Like, yeah, like you can go to a movie and be sitting next to someone who's really freaking annoying and loud. That can happen. But I think in terms of games, there's like really specific instances where you can be playing you can be playing a game and get to a point and like a bug can ruin your experience. Case in point, when I was finishing up the main story of A Realm Reborn, FF14's basically the base game of Final Fantasy 14. There is the final dungeon that you go through, the Praetorium, I believe. I was really enjoying the game up to that point. There's a bit of a slog period from like levels maybe 35 or 40 to 50, but I was still enjoying it quite a bit. And I got to the Praetorium, and I remember saying to myself during that dungeon, I have never seen a game drop the ball as hard as this game did in the last 1%. Maybe I'm fortunate, but yeah, my finishing experience with the story of 14 was totally bonked. In part because of some innate things about the game and some things that were out of my control and sort of the developer's control. That dungeon is where I discovered that there is a bug where sometimes, for no real reason that I can figure out or that anyone else can figure out, all of the sound just turns off. And it's not a problem in the settings. Settings sound still on, still at the same volumes that it was before. It just doesn't work. No sound play, no sound effects, no music, no voice lines, nothing. It just shuts off. And it's kind of a problem in a game like 14, where the music is kind of a big deal, and it's a big element of the experience that you're listening to the music. And I encountered this bug literally in the first room of the Praetorium. And it was not fun, because there is multiple scenes of characters, like the main villain gives this big, huge speech that everyone memes about, because it's such a big moment. And I just didn't hear it. I just literally could not hear it. I had to read it. And I could tell that I was missing a huge part of the experience by not hearing the voice acting. I was not able to hear the final boss theme. I went on YouTube. I quickly tabbed out and went to YouTube and looked up the final boss theme and just had that playing in the background, so I kind of pieced it together. And overall, it was a huge damper on my experience. Plus the overall, that the last two dungeons of A Realm Reborn, and I hope that this isn't something that carries over to the rest of the game, to the future expansions, but it really exposes... It's basically... the best way I can sum it up is that, what are they called? Castrum Meridianum? Yeah, and the Praetorium. Those are the last two dungeons. They basically are what FF14 would be like if it was bad. So there's this really interesting conflict, basically. There's this kind of interesting dissonance going on in the design of 14 in that it's like a single player JRPG and an MMO kind of like smashed together. And you hear that and you're like, that sounds like it doesn't work. But it works in 14 because they do each of those things very well. And for the most part, they keep them separate. They keep them separate enough that it works just enough, I think, in my opinion, in my experience. The problem with those dungeons is that those parts of the game are forced to meet in a very dramatic way. And you're like, oh, this does not work at all. This does not work. So, like, I'm dropped into the Praetorium immediately. This is the first, was it the first 8-man dungeon? Or the first 8-man raid? I don't remember. It might have been. It was one of the earliest ones. And, I get dropped in there. And then there's, like, it feels like there's 100 people running ahead of me. Pulling mobs, packs of mobs, wall to wall. I have no idea what's happening. There's like a huge conga line of all of the mobs following the tanks. And I'm just running and running and running. And then there's these mandatory unskippable cutscenes of things happening in the story. And when it goes to these cutscenes, it's literally just your character. And it's really weird. Because I go from, I feel like there's a million people around me, to I'm the only person in the cutscene. And then the characters are like, wow. Like, there's a part where you have to, like, activate a cannon to shoot a thing out of the sky, like a ship out of the sky. And there's the character goes, after you do that cutscene, and the character goes, wow, you did it. What a great shot. And I'm like, I literally didn't even click the button. Like, I literally didn't even click the button to do the thing. Like, did I? There was such a huge, massive disconnect between me and the game and the story that it was like, whoa. It was super weird and uncomfortable. And it destroyed. I usually don't think of myself as someone who gets particularly immersed in games. But yeah, the Praetorium and the Meridianum showed me that I do actually get invested in games immersed in games, because they totally destroyed my immersion. So it had to have been there in the first place. And then the Praetorium had this problem of, like, I have no idea what's going on. Everyone else knows what's going on, but I'm a new player, so I've never done this before. And I'm just running ahead, and there's like this really specific moment where you have to get a key, then take an elevator up to some ride armors, and then ride on the ride armors to the last boss, I think. I missed the key because the way that every other dungeon works in the game is that if one person picks up an item, everyone in the group gets the item. So I just went to the elevator and skipped the key. Then we take the elevator up, and there's all of the ride armors, and I'm like, why can't I ride in? And I stay there for like 3 minutes, and everyone else is locked in a cutscene. And then once the cutscene ends, because I can see when they have the little icon, once the cutscene ends, they're just gone. And I'm like, oh, I need the key. So I walk over to the elevator. I right-click on the switch to take the elevator down, which takes like 2 seconds to activate. Then I ride the elevator down. Then I go to the key. Then it takes like 3 seconds to take the key. and then I go back to the elevator, and then it takes another 2 seconds to activate the elevator, and then I ride the elevator up, and then I go up, and then I use the key on the ride armor, and then I watch like a 5-minute cutscene, and by the time I'm out of it, everyone has almost basically finished off the boss, and I'm like, okay, alright, and I'm doing all of this without sound. Oh god, it was so bad. And then there's no point. The only way to fix the bug is if you literally close out the entire game and restart in the client. There's no other way to get the sound back. And so you are locked. Once you beat the last boss, you are locked into, no joke, a 40-minute cutscene of the end of the story. And I just, eventually, as soon as I was able to skip things, I just started doing it, and then I watched the last 40 minutes of cutscenes on YouTube with someone else's character doing all the things that my character was supposed to do. And it was like, wow, that sucked. And that was an experience. I don't know if anyone else had that like I did, but I've never had that where usually other players, I've never had the experience of other players, like external factors destroying my enjoyment of a game's story that I would otherwise been invested in. Because like all of the other multiplayer games that I play are basically just like story free. Like, thinking like TF2 or frickin' anything like that. Like any multiplayer competitive game, the story's like there and it kind of like frames everything, but you don't experience the story in the actual game. It's always like exterior stuff. But here it's like I am experiencing a story, and then the multiplayer aspect, the story aspect in 14 is kept mostly separate, and that's fine, and it works. And now I'm interested in the story, and then the multiplayer component comes in, and it's just like, oh, it's like a huge train wreck. Like, these things do not mix. And, yeah, I hope that doesn't continue. So much like this fan, or I guess the opposite sense, this fan of Doki Doki experienced a bug that it increased their enjoyment or their connection with the game dramatically. I had a bug as well as some other things that decreased my enjoyment just as dramatically. I still enjoy the game, and I'm actually playing through the patch content right now. And people hate it, and I don't really know why, because the storylines are super interesting in the patch content. Like, I didn't find the base, like the Realm Reborn story, very interesting. There were some bits where it got more interesting towards the end until, again, the last, like, 5%. But I didn't really think it was anything that special. But all of the stuff, it was mostly, like, set up for the world and the characters and all these concepts. And then all the patch content comes in, and it basically capitalizes on that and does some really interesting things with it. So a lot of people say that it's like, oh, it's so boring, it's like a slog. You gotta do all these fetch errand quests. It's something like 100 quests before you can get to Heavensward. But I honestly don't mind. I'm actually enjoying it because I find the stories, the plot lines legitimately interesting with what they're doing. Basically just building off of all of the things that happened, a bunch of things that were set up in the original story. I think that's super dope. And I'm continuing to enjoy 14. I have almost probably over a week's worth of time in the game at this point. So, yeah. Second to last story. There was an auction that broke a record was it over the weekend? Let me find this real quick. Where's the story about this auction? Yeah, okay. The Legend of Zelda game auction nets a record $870,000. So basically, an unopened copy of Zelda 1 on NES went for $870K at an auction on, was it the 9th? This is when the article came out. So this reminded me immediately. I look at this and I think of that weird trend from, God, like 2015, 2014, 13. God, I don't remember how long ago that was. I was in middle school. Of copies of Super Mario Brothers going for like thousands of dollars. And it was like, why? Why? Like, it wasn't a special copy because it wasn't going at auction. It was going on eBay. Well, an eBay auction, which is, a little less prestigious. People basically just massively overvalued the value of they massively overvalued this game that was packaged with every single NES in the 80s. So that was my immediate reaction of like, oh man, people don't know what they're doing. They're buying into hype. But then apparently there's a little more legitimacy to this price tag. So apparently, considering this variant, this is quoting from the description of the auction, considering this variant was only produced for a few months in late 1987 before it was ultimately replaced by the Rev A variant in early 1988, this statement likely comes as no surprise to collectors, that being they said something about how valuable it was. Only one other variant precedes the offered NES-R variant. So this is the NES-R, and it was replaced by Revision A, Rev A. So only one other variant is known to be older than this one, and that's the NES-TM variant, which is the first true production run, or the true first production run. However, it is also widely believed that only a single sealed NES-TM example exists, and there is no telling whether or not that copy will ever come to market. Essentially, this copy is the earliest sealed copy one could realistically hope to obtain. And the WATA, which is a service that appraises video games, I actually don't know what the WATA stands for. Oh my god, wait, hang on, I'm on their website. So you go to their website, and there's a picture of a silhouette of Bruce Lee. And I was like, that's kind of strange. So if you go to Who We Are, they go, what's in a name? The inspiration for our name, Wata, comes from Bruce Lee. Be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it. It's the quote about, be Wata, my friend. It's that quote. You've probably seen it on YouTube, at least. So I thought it was a acronym, but nope. It's based on a Bruce Lee quote. That's super cheesy, but okay. Anyway, it was rated a 9.0 out of 10 by Wata, which appraises or rates the condition of video games. Essentially, this copy of the game was in damn near perfect condition, and that's probably why it brought in a cool $870,000. There's kind of an interesting fork in preservation, because this preservation to me is like kind of different from what I'm interested in. I think it's worth having like a copy of this to like put in a museum or something. But the thing that like all that stuff, all the physical stuff is important to keep. The thing that I'm interested in is like playing the games, and that's important. There's two sides to it. One is I think they're both equally important. Because the ability to actually play the game is tantamount. There's no purpose to preservation if you can't play it. But right alongside that, there is the issue of preserving physical things, which is oftentimes, a lot more difficult because things degrade, and a lot of gaming is preserved on or a lot of those parts of history are in like cardboard boxes and stuff like that, in like paper manuals, things that can easily be damaged or lost or destroyed in some way. And so things like marketing materials, box covers, manuals, all that stuff is like, I think, equally important if you want to preserve games as a medium. And so when I see a thing like this, I wonder, like, obviously it's your money and you could spend it how you want, but if it were me, I would like to see that preserved somehow in a museum of some sort. It's a shame that there isn't, like, there are the amount of like gaming museums there are very, sadly, very, very small. Recently there was a one in the Bay Area in Oakland, the MAME. Was it the MAME? Wait, MAME or Maine? The MAME. Let me look this up real quick. The MADE, the MADE, the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, who had to they're moving all their stuff into a warehouse because of COVID. They were not able to afford their space anymore, and so they're doing a fundraiser that I think is actively going on. I pitched like $20 to it because I care about it. I'd like to visit it at some point. It's probably the type of thing that I would volunteer at, honestly. I wish that there was more like official there's a lot of things I wish were more official that I think are good about the film industry, like their union laws. That's one cool thing. Having, rules or practices around making films that are not so dysfunctional, I believe is the term used from the article that I read through last week, which I think is very apt. But even there's like so many different like film preservation museums and preservation projects and ways that you can experience those movies in modern contexts. I don't know, with like a modern release, with modern additions, upgrades, updates, getting upscaled and all that stuff. You can buy them on Blu-ray and all that. Movies from like the 30s. That unfortunately does not exist for gaming. So I always end up getting a little somber in these. I don't know if the last story is going to continue. Let's see. Let's jump right into it. Anyway. This very strange. I don't know how to feel about it. It's positive, but it's weird. Let's just run through it. Tencent Studio calls halt to 996 working hours. So I was not aware of this, but apparently China has what's called a 996 culture, a work culture, which means 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. I feel exhausted just reading that sentence, and I'm assuming many people do too, listening to this. So Tencent has put their foot down and said, no, we will not allow the 996. Apparently they are calling Wednesdays health days, where everybody has to leave work by 6 p.m. Working beyond 9 p.m. on other workdays, as well as working during weekends and public holidays, requires seeking permission in advance, which is a step in the right direction. That's what I would say if this was not already part of the law. So you see, let's find the exact quote. The country's labor law says people should work up to 44 hours a week, and that overtime should generally not exceed 1 hour. Wow, that sounds great. And absolutely zero companies actually follow that, except for Tencent. So, while some commenters applauded the company giving its employees more time off, others wondered why the move was deserving of praise at all. Quote, "Those are just the rules written in the labor law," wrote one unimpressed Weibo user. It's always hilarious to me when things are pitched as like an update or a positive bonus, a good change, when in fact it's just complying with a standard. It's just fixing a problem. It's not like you're just resetting to zero. You're not making anything. You're technically making them better, but you're not increasing things beyond what they should have been in the first place. Like the Nintendo Switch. They're just calling it the OLED edition, I think. Yeah, I don't own a Switch or anything, but does not look very impressive. If I was a Nintendo fan, I would be a little disappointed. Besides the fact that it came with an Ethernet port, which kind of sucks because now if you play Smash, you basically have to buy it. But even things like that, like, oh, thank God they added an Ethernet port. Why didn't the Switch just come with an Ethernet port? How did you launch a console in 2018 and not include an Ethernet port? It's mind-boggling. I read a comment that said something along the lines of, like, it's amazing that Nintendo is able to do... They're able to get basically everything wrong except for making games. It's really quite astonishing. Because other than that, it's like, that's the most... All of the other updates are like, well, it's got an OLED screen and marginally increased storage size. So that's cool. That's cool, Nintendo. Thank you. Is there anything? Nope. There's nothing else. Everything else is just problems fixing problems that shouldn't have been in there in the first place. Woo. Okay, I just took a little breather to stretch my legs right before I wrap up. This feels like a bad episode, but sometimes I just go a whole week and I have zero interesting thoughts, and nothing really happens in the news, and you get this. Of them, this is the worst episode to date. That's what I'm going to call this, the worst episode to date. If you enjoyed this for some reason, leave a comment down below. If I ever start getting comments, then you bet your butt I'm gonna be reading them on the next podcast. So yeah, I mean my whole goal is to just get something out at once a week. That's a little easier to edit. Unlike my regular videos, because some weeks I'm not going to be able to get a video out. So yeah, if you enjoyed this at all, then leave it a like and maybe subscribe, and go check out my interview with Glenn Wickman of Rogue fame. Should I have talked about that? I don't know. I feel like the video probably speaks for itself. That was super cool, and it's climbing way faster than anything else I've really done, which is really nice. It's very cool. Thank you to everyone who maybe is listening to this because you came from that interview. It's not necessarily indicative of everything that I do. It's the first interview I've done, and it didn't have a lot of humor in it, and a lot of my stuff tends to be a little more jokey. But yeah, I hope that you're here and you enjoy the channel. Thank you. I don't have an intro. What? I don't have an outro. Bye.